Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Mr. Keeney. We are on to our second section of notes in Unit 2. Reminder that this is angle, relationships, and logic. We are using deductive reasoning to form a logical argument. And today, kind of our focus is we're going to be talking about conditional statements, what they are, how to write them, how to take definitions and write them. And a different kind of statement we're going to talk about is the negation of a statement. And then also at the end, a little bit about the converse of a conditional statement, and finally, the validity of a statement, so meaning whether it's true or false. So a lot about statements today. Some will be about geometry, some will not. Using those logic skills, though, so whether it feels like we're talking about segments, angles, or those things we associate with geometry, the logic is very much associated. So let's jump into it here. A blank is a logical statement that can be written in if-then form, and this is a conditional statement. A conditional statement is a logical statement that can be written in if-then form. And here's an example for you. You see if you take notes, then, and really here it has all these people, I should say Mr. Keeney, then Mr. Keeney will be happy. So it's a logical statement. If something happens, then something happens. You've been looking at these kind of statements ever since when you're younger and you read the book, if you give a mouse a cookie, then, and the story goes from there. That is a conditional statement, a logical statement. And we're going to be using those this year, both in real life scenarios and in geometric scenarios, both in class and those geometric scenarios we would see in real life. When a conditional statement is written in if-then form, the if part contains the hypothesis. Something that we learned maybe in science class when we were younger, the hypothesis. And the then part contains the conclusion. So when we are looking at these if-then statements, so let me change, actually I'll highlight, that's good. The part after the if, so you take notes, if I'm using that one, that is the hypothesis. You take notes, and the conclusion would be these teachers being happy. So the if and the then are not a part of the hypothesis and the conclusion. They're just there to kind of structure everything. And we're going to take another look at it here in example 2. They give us some conditional statements, and we are asked to underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion. So here for part A, if you are taking notes, then your hand is already cramping. Whether that's true or not, we're identifying the hypothesis by underlining it. We're going to say you are taking notes. Notice I did not underline the if. Again, that is not a part of the hypothesis. And the conclusion, your hand is already cramping. That is the conclusion. So you're taking notes, that's a hypothesis. And then conclusion is your hand's already cramping. We're going to do it again here for you did well on your quiz if you studied. Now this one's a little bit tricky. There's that if part. So this is our hypothesis. You studying for whatever quiz this may be, but you studied, that is the hypothesis. And then the conclusion is you did well in your quiz. So we know with the English language we can kind of shift things around, but the if part contains the hypothesis and the then part contains the conclusion. In part B, sometimes you can see we don't even have the then part. So conditional statements, 2 parts, the hypothesis and conclusion. Now we're going to have some practice writing a conditional statement. So here's a statement. Cool kids go to Lee Summit North High School. If we want to write this as a conditional, we're going to put it in if-then form. So we're going to say if you are a cool kid, I'm going to make it about you guys. If you are a cool kid, then, and our conclusion here is, and I know some of these people that are watching this don't go to Lee Summit North, so maybe we should say LSR 7, but oh well, I'll just keep it the same. If you are a cool kid, then you go to LSN High School, Lee Summit North High School. So again, we're looking here, the hypothesis, you are a cool kid, the conclusion, you go to Lee Summit North. But taking a statement like this one here and creating a conditional statement is something that we're going to be working on and hopefully we'll be able to do as we go through in this unit. The blank of a statement is the exact opposite meaning of the original. We call this the negation. If we negate a statement. We are taking the exact opposite meaning. And we have some examples here, example 4 and example 5. The first statement for example 4, polygon ABCD is convex. If I want to negate it, we're going to take the opposite meaning. So polygon ABCD, the opposite would just be as simple as saying, okay, it is convex. The opposite of saying it is not convex. So the negation, again, taking the opposite meaning, sometimes it's just as simple as adding one word, saying it is not this. The next one, statement, the car is not blue. The opposite would say, and this time we're just taking out a word, the car is blue. So sometimes the negation depends. You could add a word, take away a word, but either way, we want the exact opposite meaning. So for the car is not blue, the opposite was saying, well, actually, you know what, it is blue. That is the negation. So negation, example 4 and example 5. Example 6, and there's really not too much to do here, kind of leads into converse. It says, if something, let me underline this here, I'm going to kind of use it to help me out. If something is a US $50 bill, then, and I'll have to get creative with my circle here, that'll work. Then it has a picture of Grant on it. Now look what they did on this next one. If something has a picture of Grant on it, Grant being the president that is on the $50 bill, and then over here, and notice I'm switching up because that's exactly what they did. If I were to say this is my hypothesis, and then this is my conclusion, what they've done, so they said if hypothesis, then conclusion. They've switched it. They've switched on this one. They said if our original, let me say original conclusion, then original hypothesis. This has a word. So when I look at these two statements, they're very related. I have taken my conditional statement here, and I have switched the hypothesis and conclusion. And that is exactly what the converse statement is. It is switching the hypothesis and conclusion of a conditional statement. All right, so when we just saw an example of it up there of we would take the original, so this would be our conditional. Now we know that this would be our converse, conditional converse. You just take the hypothesis and conclusion and you switch those. In our last example here, write the if-then form and the converse of the statement. Olympians are athletes, and then we're going to say whether it's true or false. So if you are an Olympian, then you are an athlete. So this would be our conditional. This is just me taking the statement and writing it in if-then form. If we want to say whether this is true or false, we can do that right now. If you're Olympian, then you're an athlete. That is true. That is true because if you're an Olympic athlete, you're an Olympian, you have to be an athlete. Olympian is a very elite and special type of athlete. Now, when I look at the converse, I want to switch the hypothesis and conclusion. So I'm still going to have if, but I'm going to say if you are an athlete. So I'm starting kind of with this over here. Not kind of, I am starting with that over there. I'm starting with the original hypothesis, and I'm saying then the original, or excuse me, starting with the original conclusion. Starting with the original conclusion, and then I'm saying then the original hypothesis, which is you are an Olympian. And you can see with this one, if we're looking at true, false, this one is false. And we're going to provide a counter example. This one's false. It says if you're an athlete, you're an LS or you are an Olympic athlete, and I just said what my counterexample is. What about Lee Summit North athletes? They are athletes and they work very hard every single day, but that does not mean that they are Olympians. So there is my counterexample. And that is the end of these notes. So that was section 2.2 day 1 notes. There will be a day 2 later. Thank you for watching. I'm Mr. Keeney. If you have any questions, please reach out. I will talk to you guys later.